KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Whiplash Moriarty. Dagan, how are you, my friend? Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Carl. Hi, guys. Hi, guys.
It's time for a little knockback, my friend.
It really is.
Yeah.
Time flies, baby.
How's life?
Everything's good. I feel like I need another cup of coffee, but I hit my allotment, 2 cups. That's it.
Really? You stick to that? Why are you strict about that? The caffeine?
I'm super strict. My routine is have a cup of, put Graydon on the bus, put my youngest on the bus, 9 o'clock, come back in, have my cup of coffee. I'm like dying for it all morning. Then I can't have my second cup until I take my 45-minute walk. But the problem with me and coffee, and Helene's trying to cajole me into going black.
As she understands that once you go black, you never go back.
That's correct.
Right. That's how I've learned that recently in the last few years.
Did not expect it to go in this direction, but let's just continue on.
Embrace it. Sure.
See, I can't have that much sugar, but I like my coffee light and sweet. So I give myself my 2 cups. I can't really do more than that because I just feel like I'm cheating too much. But yeah, today, usually I'm okay. But today, coming into the podcast, and we're even recording a little early, I'm just like, I need this cup, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to restrain myself. I'm going to behave.
Good for you.
Yeah. How you doing?
Yeah. I'm okay. Yeah, I just I felt real schlubby when we got back from Houston from the live show because I didn't work out for like 3 days actually, and I'd never go more than 1 day without working out, and that's usually only once a month I take a day off. Really.
Okay.
So I felt really schlubby, and then I got back. So we were back. What was it? Saturday night, and then Sunday I was just so fucked. Like I was just so tired that I was like, I can't work out today. So then I just didn't work out again that day.
I hear that.
And then I got back into it on Monday, and then really hard workout yesterday, Tuesday. We're recording this on a Wednesday. So I got to get back into things as well. But it's good to be back in the swing of things, especially because we get to record KnockBack again.
Yes.
Our retro and nostalgia podcast, all about old things. And we're going for something a little newer today, although it's relatively old. And it's something that people have wanted us to get into for some time, especially considering that we've already watched 2 MCU movies. So it's time to watch the 3rd MCU or Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and that is Iron Man 2 from 2010. We've been kicking this topic around for a long time. I felt like we might as well just get it off the list.
Absolutely.
And begin. So we sat down. I don't know when you watched it, but Micah and I watched it just last night, rented it on Amazon because I don't have Disney Plus. So I spent like $3 and rented it on Amazon, and yeah, there's a lot to say about it. It's an interesting film. I will say this, though, at the top, that I think it's the worst of the 3 so far that I've seen. We're watching them in sequential order. I really, really like the first Iron Man movie a lot. I think that movie's awesome. I think Iron Man's an awesome character. And then I was actually really surprised about how much I liked the Hulk flick. I thought that was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I remember
with this
surprised.
movie, yeah. I found myself getting a little bored.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be a fun one.
Like I was like, I think a little too much action, a little too much Transformers like action, especially.
Okay. I'm with you.
Certainly some good performances, some great characters, a little bit more of an exploration of this particular sub-universe in the Marvel universe, which I like because I go into these not really knowing. And then I'm on Wikipedia during the movie because I'm looking up like, oh, is this Justin Hammer? This must be like a person from the show. This Whiplash. Where did this person come from? Because I have no idea. I'm much more curious in that about that. Gary Shandling. Senator, American senator.
What?
I have to look into these various things.
Of course.
So yeah, this was my first time seeing it, and I think it was good. That was kind of my takeaway. I thought it was pretty good, but definitely my least favorite so far, and makes me kind of anxious to just get through Iron Man 3 so that we can move on and get to everything that they're setting up, because obviously they begin really setting things up in this film in a major way, which is cool.
Lots of table setting. Yep.
So that's like my high level thoughts here on Iron Man 2. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time for more KnockBack. No, we have much more to say, obviously. So, Dig, let's hear from you, my friend. Iron Man 2. What's your history with this film? And then, you watched it again. What are your kind of high level thoughts?
You just gave a Chris Stuckman episode. Do you know that guy?
No, I don't think so.
He's like a big YouTuber, pop culture YouTuber. specifically with movie reviews, but he does like the get in, get out 3 to 5 minute review thing. It's just like he seems like a cool guy. It's just there's so little substance to his format. I don't want to say him or anything. Just the way he does it. That's what it sounded like. It was like a little bite sized. Like and they can't spoil things. You know, it's like the benevolent side of YouTube. Like no spoilers. Like we're just gonna keep it jive with my little personality. I'm going to go in and I love everything. I love Dragon Ball. I love Marvel, like, you know, that type of thing. Good vibes. So good vibes is good, but that's what it felt like to me. Yeah, man, I'll give you my 10,000 feet perspective. First of all, I don't even realize that I missed this film the first time around, but pretty early on, I was like, I've never seen this. I don't know how I missed it. These things happen, but it is nice to go back. You and I are plotting to do the whole MCU in order of release, not in timeline order. I really do wish you would get Disney Plus because we're going to do the MCU. And
I guess I really have to. Yeah, but the thing is that my original idea was to get through the MCU at a cadence where we would start to how do you put this? Thin out the distance between us and the newest product.
Sure.
But they come out so fucking quickly.
There's so many.
And there's only 25, 26 episodes of this show a year now to do.
That's right.
That we're not going to get to more than a few a year probably. And my hope, and I think that'll be okay, but it's like once we get through this, then I think we're getting into like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And then it really starts to blow up from that point.
Next.
So yeah, from that perspective, it's going to be a little daunting to do it all, but I intend to do it all. And I guess what I'm saying is that since we're spreading it out so much, I would rather I'm saving money just buying it.
No, you really are, especially with less
episodes. I got to be honest, I'm not trying to be a dickhead, Dig. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say this because I always tell people to speak with their wallets, right? To speak with your wallets, give money to the people that you think deserve it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's really important. I hate Disney. Like it doesn't mean that I'll never buy or play a Disney product or that I don't like some of their old shit because I love a lot of the old stuff.
Right.
You know, from Robin Hood to Peter Pan to Fox and the Hound. I mean, I love that shit.
Yeah.
But modern Disney is anathema to everything I want and believe in, and I refuse to give them money. Where I can
you got to do you.
Where I can help it. It's very similar to the way I feel about Amazon, where I actually like Amazon, but I use Amazon so much that I really try to just be like, can we buy this somewhere else? Like, can we get the dog food from Chewy even? Can we, can I order the TV from fucking Best Buy? I really try to do those things to just be like, can we just not get involved in this black hole of a business at all times? And that's really the way I feel about it, you know? And unfortunately for that, I mean, this is not even the Disney era of it. So it's, right?
No,
I mean,
they came in mid. I mean, I think they were already in production for a year when Disney swept in and bought it while this movie was in production. So I don't know how much shot calling they did, or if it was still under the Paramount umbrella or what. But that's what makes it a specifically interesting movie. But I hear you. You got to do you. And it is interesting to think of Disney Plus as a one-stop shop, Amazon-like, because look, like Marvel, Henson, Disney, Star Wars, Pixar, what is it? Nat Geo Kids? Is that or is it Discovery Kids? Correct.
It would be Nat Geo because Discovery would be with Warner, I think.
That's a Warner thing. Yeah, that's WB. But you know what, dude? I had fun with this one. Moves at a brisk pace, entertaining. It doesn't get too mired down in melodrama. You know, you got RDJ, you got Jon Favreau. Give me a little Mickey Rourke. Gary, how's my hair shandling? Like, yeah, oh my God.
When Gary Shandling was there, I was like, is that immediately? I was like, fucking Gary Shandling is in this movie? I just didn't anticipate that.
Like one of my childhood idols, like maybe my intro even to stand up and the comedy format in general.
He was a funny cat, R.I.P.
Oh, yeah, dude, he was so good. And you know, one of those cats where I realized early on, we talk about this a lot on the show, like one of those comics, had he survived, because I think he died in 2015, 2016. I could just from this movie. And it's kind of a light presentation, the tone and everything. But I could see something in the performance where I was like, he could cross over into drama, like a Steve Carell, like a Jim Carrey, like an Adam Sandler. Like I could see him doing that. So it was a shame to lose him so early because I could see him going over to that side and being like giving us some dramatic turns. But yeah, man, I know the sentiment is this movie is starting to go downhill for Iron Man pretty rapidly. But I got to say, man, I really enjoyed it. And it is interesting to think there is some kind of Disney Disney has in the vault somewhere the Favreau cut. Favreau wasn't too pleased with the outcome. I guess he didn't have final cut. RDJ, our man Robert Downey had his problems. I think Mickey Rourke had his issues. Maybe Sam Rockwell had a couple of things that he was unhappy with. So it is interesting that it came out to this good, and there is a better version. But yeah, man, Mile High, I dug it.
Yeah, wait, tell me more about that, because I try not to read too much about the production. I find that interesting, but I try not to be a Wikipedia page when I'm talking about this stuff. So if I don't know that stuff naturally, then I'm not really going to come in with it. So there was problems with this film.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I'm a big Jon Favreau fan, first of all, dating way back. And obviously he's come a long way from that indie film, acting, directing, Swingers, Made, even his comedic turns opposite Vince Vaughn or in movies like The Breakup, where I think he's hilarious. Like he's become a pop culture shepherd, specifically under the Disney camp with Marvel, with Star Wars, right? So I see his name attached. I'm already super interested because I think he's one of those cats that crossed over, and I think just does he's just very connected to nerd culture vibes and doing it the right way. And then I see Justin Theroux's name, and then I see the actors who were attached, and I see Genndy Tartakovsky storyboarded the film. So I'm already like, oh, what's going on here? Like this is a nerd centric super camp of people, like a great collection of people working on the film. And then hearing that, kind of looking at the timelines, and you're reminded like Disney swept in, put their $4 billion down and bought Marvel when this film was already like halfway through production, let's say. So I'm thinking like, oh shit, like Disney / Paramount, how are they dividing that up? And the whole tricky thing with Sony still going on, especially with Spider-Man. So I'm wondering like, how's this going? And then I'm kind of reading into it and finding out like, I guess there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and Jon Favreau and Robert Downey, who probably, give those guys creative control. These guys have, the proof's in the pudding. These guys have proven themselves time and time again. But apparently the execs at, I guess it was Paramount, Disney might have come in and compounded the problem. But I guess there was a lot of kind of creative wrestling over the film. And specifically with the Mickey Rourke character, with the Whiplash character, and the origins of Howard Stark. And I guess Robert Downey and Jon Favreau wanting it to make a little more gray, like Howard Stark maybe was an asshole. So maybe when this Vanko guy comes in, he's trying to avenge his dad, maybe he's justified. But the studio wanted a very black and white type of thing, they didn't want they wanted the transparent villain. They wanted just a straight up villain, and they wanted to water it down and make it more commercially viable and everything. So I thought that was really interesting because I think the final product still works pretty well for me. I have to say though, I always feel bad when we have these discussions. With Star Wars, it's something I'm entrenched in. But with Marvel, I didn't grow up a big Marvel comic book mark. Like what is Iron Man from the Silver Age? See, I don't even know. So I always go back to the fans, the true fans, especially in Iron Man, especially from the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, where it's like, these are the guys who really should be talking about this. But for me, from my sort of ignorant and naive point of view concerning Marvel, the movie still worked for me. So it is interesting to think that there was so much contention with the production. And I guess that's one thing you could say about Disney coming in too. I guess the creative cohesion became better once they were on board and once they sort of gelled everything into a cohesive product. But this was still that age where it was, maybe there were too many cooks in the kitchen. But I like the product. It doesn't usually it feels that way to me. I could kind of read through the final product and say, yeah, this was, there was a lot of people creatively calling the shots, and it seems like a little bit of everything and not under one creative, cohesive vision. But I didn't really see that in the final product this time.
Yeah, I think it felt a little chaotic to me. Like I didn't really know quite what it was trying to be about, I guess. Okay. And so I really would have embraced more of that grayness. I think that's it. And I think it's interesting that these early Marvel films, although, 2008's Hulk, which I thought was actually very good. It's funny that they ran into problems with Edward Norton and he's kind of disappeared. Obviously they recast what's his name, War Machine in this one.
Yeah,
over
Terrence
money
Howard, they
issues.
replaced him.
Right.
Yeah.
And Micah made a really good point, because I was reading about Terrence Howard. She's like, it's funny that he was the big name in the first Iron Man. And I was like, holy shit, you're right. Like, and looking back, he was being nominated for like huge awards during that early and mid aughts era for some of his films.
Yes.
And he apparently went from like $8 million to $1 million or something, his contract in the second film. And I guess that's why he was insulted or something like that and didn't want to do it. But it's just interesting that there was so much conflict with some pretty big names, because if I'm Marvel, I still want to be very much involved with Ed Norton. And I definitely want to maintain my connection to some of these other, some of these other huge actors, obviously, like Robert Downey Jr. and others, which they didn't have. But my overall take on the film is that, and it's kind of what I said earlier, I like Iron Man. I think this is a cool character. I've always liked this character. I didn't really know very much about him when I was a kid. There was that cartoon that was on for a couple of years. Sure. I don't know if anyone remembers it. That I was kind of exposed to. I had some of his toys. I thought the toys were really cool during that mid-90s era, because the armor came off and the gunshot. It felt like coming from G.I. Joe, before we started to miss G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe goes away in 1994. And before we really start to miss it, because G.I. Joes are kind of old school, like toys by that point really coming in with TMNT, but just a lot of others, the Terminator toys, whatever, just more points of articulation, bigger, brawnier, more weapons. G.I. Joes were quaint, and they were kept the same because they all kind of were interchangeable with each other and their vehicles and their weapons and all of that. So you have to keep that mold, and they kind of started to feel a little bit old by the mid 90s. And so when they went away, and we didn't really know what we were missing yet, because G.I. Joe even came back in 1995 as G.I. Joe Extreme, looking just like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figure, basically. Fucking sucked. Me and my friend Eric used to call it G.I. Joe Urine, like urine.
Nice.
Yeah. G.I. Joe Urine. That was like that's what we used to call it. But so that Iron Man figure was just memorable because it was all like metallic, and the fucking face was cool and stuff. But I was never really in the comics. I watched the cartoon, very similar to Batman. And I don't think even at this time I was like Marvel, DC, whatever. I would just go into stores and just buy the figures I thought were cool. Like the action figures I remember like really loving: Archangel, who I think is an X-Men, Silver Samurai, Omega Red, Bishop. Guys like that. Like, I just wanted cool characters, but I didn't really know anything about them. And Iron Man was a very similar figure for me, but I've always been really intrigued by him. So when the first film came out and I was able to kind of make the connections, and I don't know how much they played up more and more from the movie as opposed to the comic. And I don't really remember it from the show, but just that he's an arrogant kind of asshole, bravado, smart, and he reminds me a little bit of like the other side of the coin of a Batman, where he's like the not depressed Batman. He's the not depressed, similar genius to a Bruce Wayne.
Sure. And
obviously in these different worlds. And so they appeal to me in a very, very similar way, especially because I'm not really into superheroes per se. I don't like when they have, and I know there's a lot of this in these later movies, but I don't like that they have necessarily like superpowers and stuff. I like when they can explain it. Iron Man is totally explainable. And that's why I think it's fun, because it grounds it. I don't have to embrace the silliness, at least yet. And so I found that very attractive, and probably one of the most attractive parts of this. And I also think that Robert Downey Jr.'s performance is just really good. And it's interesting to see Gwyneth Paltrow in this. Again, obviously, they just have some interesting big names that they got involved. And of course, I think Mickey Rourke did a really nice job in this. Samuel L. Jackson kind of coming to the fruition and building this Marvel Cinematic Universe, this greater and grander thing. So I dig the movie, but my major complaint with it is I just think it's the action is really muddy. It reminds me a lot of 2007 Transformers in that regard, similar era, where there's actually a lot of stuff in the beginning towards the beginning where I'm like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, what is happening? It's moving so fast. It's pretty ugly. It doesn't look quite right. There are things that definitely don't look great. And I think that there's a reliance on CG here where there just doesn't need to be. For instance, like the suit shots. Like, why couldn't some of these suit shots have been real? I don't understand why he's putting on his boot. Why can't that be real? I don't understand why he can't step into a boot. Why do we have to do it so that everything turns into CG? And I just think from this era, I think that there's probably a point where it's indistinguishable. I really believe that. And it probably happens. I mean, I haven't seen the films yet, but I imagine it's going to happen 5 years from where we are in the movies.
That's right.
Where
I think that's right.
Where I think things are going to be like, okay, who cares? It doesn't even look any different, but it does look different here, and you can tell. And so it adds this kind of cartoonish patina over a story that should be somewhat serious. I mean, and the coolest thing about it, and I recall this feeling this way about Iron Man 1 as well, and it's not a vibe I got in any of the other Iron Man stuff I absorbed as a kid, was it's about the military industrial complex. And it's about war. And I find it very timely indeed.
Yes.
So I wanted to say that.
Yeah.
So those are my like next, or I guess those are my highest level thoughts. But the next thing I want to ask you, Dave, is what do you think about the way everything is set up? So, I have it here. The truth is I am Iron Man and all that. Now I think they established that at the end of the first one, right?
Yes.
Right. I think that might even be from the first one.
Yep.
And they set it up so that the enemies in this ones are Russian. There's so many things here where I'm like, oh, they would never do this anymore. That was one of them, because they would have to, because we're supposed to hate all the Russians now. So we can't have any fun with post-Soviet storylines, certainly. And the other thing that I thought was just there's quite a few sexual jokes right off the bat.
Yeah.
That I would be like, now this seems very Iron Man. This seems very Robert Downey Jr. I'm like, man, they wouldn't get away with saying that anymore. Like, Tony just makes a straight up sexual harassment joke to Pepper Potts at some point. And I wanted to ask you about what you thought of the political kind of ramifications of it, specifically because he says, quote, "I've successfully privatized world peace," end quote. And that's such an interesting statement. And I find that if there's one thing that this movie does for me to make me more excited about the MCU is is it deeper than I thought it was? Or is it just this that's deep, like Iron Man? Because they're making some deep implications about the structure of the earth, about weapons manufacturers, about things that, frankly, I complain about a lot. How they steal from each other, they propagate war and do all the rest for their profit, obviously, and how Iron Man and War Machine kind of get involved in all of this. So I'm just curious what you think about the more political status of this film. Not unlike the Hulk, which was political in its own way, but I was just surprised to be hit by that. And I don't know if that was obvious, overt, or even intentional, or if that's just supposed to be kind of like a MacGuffin. Yeah,
I think you make a lot of good points. And I think a lot of it is taken from the comic, too. A lot of these motifs, a lot of the tone, a lot of the things that it's suggesting, the things that it's symbolizing or whatever. Yeah, it does. I mean, it does get deeper. I'm not, super intimately, associated with the MCU. I haven't seen everything, but it does get more complex just on the basis of the characters forming a group and the complexities of that, different stances on different matters when you're trying to defend the earth and all that sort of thing. So, and I love what you said about Iron Man too, because he is a great character and he is kind of Marvel's answer to DC's Batman, right? He's kind of the billionaire superhero. He's definitely got his character quirks and possibly his faults, but his heart's in the right place. You know what I mean? He wants to serve the cause of good. And what I love about Iron Man, and I think about this with Spider-Man and characters like the Hulk, I would put certainly Wolverine in this class. Like, they work by themselves, these characters, but they also work in the group format. And I think that's what makes them special. You could put Iron Man in the Avengers. He's still awesome. Tony Stark's still awesome, but you could pull him out like a Peter Parker. And I just want to know about this guy. It's cool to see Spider-Man operate with the Hulk and with Tony and with Firestar and with Iceman. But, give me solo Peter Parker too. So I love that, like a character that just works on both fronts, because I love characters like Storm or Gambit or Cable, but I don't really want to see them by themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love Gambit. That's a really neat.
Oh, he's a great character
from the cartoon era. I really liked him. I mean, that was my introduction to a lot of these characters. So I always just think about him.
He's great.
And I had an action figure with him too, with his little cloak.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
I never had any of those Marvel characters, but that is something I kind of feel like I missed.
I think it was all like Toy Biz and stuff like that.
I think you're right.
The company that was doing them.
Yeah, and very collectible to this day. And then
is that true? Because I sold them all for like $1 each.
Yeah,
dude. Garage sale.
Everything is. Everything from the 80s, 90s, and of course the 70s and earlier.
Except for Star Wars, because we all had them. Your Star Wars stories are worthless.
Much of it. Yeah, that's definitely true. Kenner era Star Wars is a whole different matter. But then, you know, I think about with the solo superhero thing, and a lot of that you got to give credit to McFarlane and then Liefeld and Image Comics, because they just made individual characters so cool. Think of characters like Spawn and visually cool. Like you're saying, that was really the era of going into a toy store and putting your money down for a dude or a dudette that just looked awesome. It didn't even matter the affiliation. And then, of course, salute to Capcom and the video game companies for putting characters like Silver Samurai and Omega Red, these more obscure characters, into video games. And everybody's like, who the fuck is this? I want more of this dude. So I love everything you said about that. But yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at this movie. It's what makes, first of all, everything's built around RDJ's charisma, right? I mean, Tony Stark, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., whatever you want to say, like everything is constructed around how good he is in this role. I mean, how good he is, period, but how good he is in this role, how he embodies this character. And this is just another reminder of that. Like, that's the epicenter and that's the nucleus, and everything else is built around that. So that's fantastic and wonderful. And I just love the fact that you have this character, and I think later on we'll talk about the villains and how they work and how they don't work. But just with our protagonist, the fact that you have this guy with the resources. Not only does he have the intelligence and the wherewithal, but he has the resources to be successful at doing this thing. And you could argue he has the pedigree. You know, he's the brilliant inventor. So he's got all this stuff going for him, but he's this narcissist and he's super cocky, but he's still lovable. And at the core of this character, even though he has, again, all these character faults and things that may turn you off a little bit to the character, it's like at the center of everything, he really does. He's not in it for himself. He already has everything. You know what I mean? He has everyone he wants. He has everything he wants. He's really doing it at the center of things to protect humanity. Like, that's really his cause. So you kind of forgive him for his character quirks. And I love that in the character, because he's not just he's not the Superman type. He's not this warm and fuzzy, like good, good through good type character. He's got his faults, and that's awesome. That just makes for a great character and super compelling. And then everything's built around that. Even with the sexual innuendos, it's a great actually point that you bring up, because this film got a PG-13 rating. And I was thinking a lot of that's got to be the sexual innuendo and the sexual content, not nudity, not anything over the top.
Yeah, it's nothing bad at all. It's just like through a modern lens, it shows you how quickly things changed.
Absolutely. And it's only been 12, 13 years, but he is this lecherous playboy. Like he sexually harasses, and then, with that quippy type dialogue, he kind of sexually harasses, then apologizes for it in the same sentence, like in the same breath. So he is kind of an obnoxious character, but, I think that those outer layers that he wears is protecting this inner core of goodness, and that's what makes the character lovable. But it is interesting, and it's the same, the kind of the way it treats this pre-Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment world, right? It's almost like what you said about the special effects. Like, this was the dawning of an era where, like you said, 4 to 6 years later, special effects almost cross over into this much more timeless sort of period, this era where things are going to look a lot better for a lot longer. Like, our discerning eyes are still catching weird things in the CG, in the special effects, in the the compositing, even from the top companies that are doing this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? The movie magic. It is that era where it still looks a little dicey to our now 2023 eye. So it is crazy. It is kind of cool to go back and explore this movie from those various perspectives, because it really was a different era only less than 15 years ago. For the visuals, for the content, the tone, because I don't think you put that kind of stuff in like the next iteration of MCU. Disney.
Unfortunately not, because it's not to say that it's always sunny in Philadelphia in every one of these MCU movies. But like you said, I read this character as being like that. So why wouldn't he be like that? There's no consequences for him. Like you say, he's got a quick wit and he's apologetic. He's handsome. The women probably that he's saying these things to probably like him anyway. You know, there's like a whole complicated thing. I think we've lost sight in some way. I mean, I haven't, you haven't, but I think many people have lost sight of the fact that watching someone say, do, whatever, act a certain way is not a reflection on you. It's a fucking movie.
Yeah, it's a character in a movie.
Right. So you want them to be like, we have this problem in games a lot where the villains aren't whatever enough or whatever. I'm like, don't you want them to be just, you know, the villains are, why is this villain so evil? It's like, well, I don't know, man, because the villain is fucking evil. It's like, why is Cobra a terrorist organization? So, well, that's necessary for the story to move on. We don't have to necessarily live within a realm where everyone can be friends and nothing bad happens and nothing unfortunate or untoward happens. And so I think that it was kind of refreshing in some sense to see that, although it was limited, I definitely noticed it. And it was something that the other thing I noticed, and goes again to how quickly time has changed, is shit. You see Bill O'Reilly pop up in this
yes.
in an earnest way. You see Long Island's own Bill O'Reilly. You see Elon Musk pop up in this.
Yep.
And which is funny. I think that there's a lot of interesting things in that regard here too, just showing you how quickly it's like it's like Trump in Home Alone 2, where everyone acts like they hate Donald Trump, which is fine. I'm not a big fan myself, but that wasn't always the case.
Right.
And here's a societal exhibit of just how okay it was and just how big he was and just how everyone would be like, oh, it's Donald Trump. Because that's probably the way it was when the movie was in the theater in the early 90s. And so it's just so funny to see Bill O'Reilly, who is a scumbag, and someone like Elon Musk, who I actually like a lot, but who, you know, has definitely fallen into repute with much of society for whatever reason. It's just so funny to see these pieces of history and why maybe doing things like that is stupid, period, in movies, because it just dates your movie.
It does. It really does. You would think a guy like a visionary like Jon Favreau would know that. But again, I wonder like how much of that is movie studio pressure, like, you know, let's fuel this with, you know, feed this with cameos, because it gives people another reason, like it's another talking point, right? And or, you know, I think it's a poor call, but I think I could see movie execs seeing it that way.
And to me, we have to get away from these pop culture references. I think in some of these things, it's cool, but like, does it ever work out? Is it ever like, wow, that's so timely? I think it's just a way to artificially date your stuff. And so I wanted to call that out. But I was curious, Dave, let's talk about some of the specific scenes and some of the specific moments in the movie here. By the way, my notes are so small. Like they printed out so small for some reason.
Oh, you typed them?
I don't know why it is. I'm like, I'm like, I have to put the page up like right to my face to be able to see what's going on here. So first of all, John Slattery as Howard Stark. I didn't anticipate this. This is during Mad Men too, so this was extra exciting.
Good point.
To see. But I like this whole Stark Expo and all of this kind of secret hidden information and kind of the progeny and the connection. But something you said earlier was really quite fascinating to me, which was this original idea of him being morally gray, because that seems to be something that's not embraced in either film, as far as I can tell, which is that the self-awareness that you yourself are the bad guys. Like in some way, like I think that Bruce Wayne in Batman seems to understand that Wayne Enterprises could be corrupted and taken over and do bad things and all this kind of stuff, and he's aware of that. And there seems to be less of a self-awareness that this weapons manufacturer is not only competed with by really nefarious organizations like Hammer, but also that it's being taken advantage of and part of this military industrial complex. That's why I'm curious if Iron Man comes from that era of war, like that era of cognizance of war as a commercial enterprise. You know, late 50s, early 60s. I wouldn't be surprised if that was where it came from. I have no idea though. So what do you make of all of that? And I mean, you can pull from any thread you'd like, kind of these early goings and the introduction to the Stark Expo, which is in Queens, I think. I found it really funny that he comes out of his Iron Man suit into a perfectly, perfect suit. He's in his tux, no wrinkles or anything like that. Very impressive.
Good call.
Very, very impressive. Talk to me about this stuff.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I mean, shout out the Flushing Queens. I like, the nods to the World's Fair, New York World's Fair, and that sort of Tomorrowland vibe. But the Queens thing stuck out to me, so I had to research this. Jon Favreau's not only from Queens, he's from Flushing. So this was a whole nod to where he grew up. And that I knew he was from New York. I didn't know he was from Queens specifically. So just having that all in there works, totally works. But I knew it was suspicious. So I had to check on that. I mean, you and I are such marks for Mad Men, right? So seeing John Slattery in anything, it's like, but how awesome does this man embody the 1950s, 60s gentleman / dad? He's sort of like this Elon Musk meets Walt Disney type. Like they were definitely channeling. Like, did you ever see the old videos of Uncle Walt like talking about Tomorrowland and Epcot? He was really into that. I mean, he was really, everybody thinks of him as this artist, and he was, but he definitely had this engineering technological passion too, and progression and evolution and the futuristic city and everything like that. So I love that because it just reminded me. I mean, it looked like they were pulling from those old Disney videos, which, would make sense, especially in another year when Disney owned everything. But I love that. And, it is a shame to me to know, like, they had this more gray argument with the heroes and the villains in this movie. And it just goes to show you, like, trust your characters. Like, not only is it Iron Man, like a character rooted in fiction over many decades, but it's Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark. And it's just like, I feel like that character could have handled a more gray sort of confrontation with an enemy that was maybe justified. If this Mickey Rourke character, this Ivan Vanko character, is avenging his dad because Tony Stark's dad in Howard sort of wronged his partner, or at least someone who maybe wasn't a partner, but somebody who heavily contributed to his success, and then sort of poo-pooed this guy and stole the credit for himself. If Tony had to deal with that more gray legacy and then deal with the direct repercussions to this guy's progeny and like, oh, here I am, I'm going to offend my dad because your dad fucked us over type thing. I would not only like to see that because it's more interesting, but I would love to see Tony deal with a more gray villain. Again, trust your character. Like, that would have been so interesting. So I understand if that really is the way it played out. I understand Favreau's beefs with that. Not only that, but you have probably one of the best character actors who ever lived in Mickey Rourke. Like, give this guy something to do. It's pretty weak. He's a pretty weak villain. He's pretty toothless. And that's because, you didn't give him anything to work with. I think the execs swooped in and said, let's just do a black and white villain and just make him a bad guy.
This was as you said, disappointing to Mickey Rourke.
I could definitely see him having a problem with it because he's notoriously contentious anyway, like a lot of these geniuses are. And, shout out to Mickey Rourke, man. I discovered him. I know he was a heartthrob dating back to the early 80s, but like when he did the whole Phoenix bursting out of the ashes thing, with, parts like Marv in Sin City. When was that? Like 2005-ish. And then Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler later on in the decade. That was even before 2010, maybe 2008. I was a Mickey Rourke fan from the moment The Wrestler rolled, like, opposite Marissa Tomei. That's an amazing movie if no one's ever seen it. And a great comment about like aging professional wrestlers, WWF styled wrestlers. Awesome. But so, yeah, you got these who's. Sam Rockwell is the only character that they, I think, successfully gave something to him to work with. Like that was a successful sort of collaboration and a nice meeting of the character and the person playing the character. But yeah, I feel like there were, as much as I liked the movie and I thought it was a lot of fun, there were a lot of misses. So that's, but I think even with that flatter, more mundane sort of pedestrian presentation, I think it still worked okay.
Yeah, I feel like maybe the villains are transposed where, obviously Hammer is funding and is kind of like the overarching kingpin like villain. But then you have Whiplash as kind of the soldier. But they don't really play it like that because we don't get enough. We don't, with the exception of the F1 race, which I think is a really cool part.
Love that part
like the really, really neat combat action part. I don't really feel like we get to see very much of the build in that character, and Hammer ends up being kind of more important, but we don't really care because he's just a dude. I mean, Iron Man can just blow him away
right
at any given time. That's why that's why I was anxious to read about the Hammer character, because I was surprised that there wasn't some sort of Iron Man that he turned into or took over, just very similar to War Machine, kind of having this third version of the suit, but he is just some dude, some squishy dude. So, and I like the idea of him just being this guy who's jealous and who's like in second place and just steals his technology and schmoozes with politicians. I think that's a really neat villain idea. But yeah, they don't quite achieve, I think, what they're trying to set out to achieve in this with a lot of effect. And that's especially disappointing, not only because of Mickey Rourke, like you said, being a very good actor, but also because I think that Whiplash character is super cool. I actually went in and I am like, who the hell is the villain in this movie? I have no idea. And then having never seen it, and then in the opening sequence when they're in Washington during the different committees and they introduce Hammer, I'm like, well, is that the villain? So then I'm expecting him to like turn into someone, like I was saying. But then they introduce, very quickly as well, like concurrent to this, the Russian guy who ends up being Mickey Rourke, and so there's something there. But it wasn't until I started Googling around, I'm like, okay, so this guy's name is Whiplash, and I for some reason I just didn't know who the villain even was, and I really dug that whole idea of him having some sort of arc. What is that? A reactor, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
what
arc reactor. Sure, like he had his own version of that. Yeah,
right. And he like custom built it in the Soviet Union or in Russia or whatever, and and it just came with these 2 electric style whips. It was all kind of built as a machine. I thought it was super dope. I loved it. Loved when he walked out onto the F1 race and just cut the car in half. I was like, that's super, super dope.
Awesome.
And so I really, really liked that a lot. But yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere, in my opinion. And the cooler characters end up being Iron Man and War Machine, but those are the guys from the first one. So we're kind of used to it already. Like, I like War Machine's little gun on his shoulder.
Yeah.
He looks like Vile from Mega Man X.
Good call. Except no purple armor. Yeah, because he has the more conventional weapons. So War Machine is a little different, and it's sort of Stark Industries meets Hammer, so he's kind of like both things, which is kind of interesting. But you're right. Like, it's too bad that the villain, at least the one villain in Mickey Rourke's character, is too one-dimensional, because it would have been nice to have a little more substance there. Because really what you're creating is the good guy hero, the bad guy villain, and then they're going to do the fight. And of course the good guy's got to win. So it's predictable. I love what you said though, Kyle. And this is where I kind of celebrate my ignorance of the comic books especially in a lot of the Marvel stuff, is because I don't know the character Whiplash. I don't know. First of all, I can't take exception because I don't know what departures they're taking from the source material. And number 2, everything's a surprise. Like, I don't know that Hammer guy is not going to turn into some Venom-like bad guy that's going to have this superpower, or, he's going to have some kind of badass armor, or he's going to be mutated. So it's nice to just kind of be treated to real surprises in this spoiler heavy world. But my heart, at the same time, my arc reactor robotic heart does go out to like the Marvel fans that grew up with the comic books, that they're the ones that are really emotionally attached to the material. So I always wonder what their takes are going to be. And I don't even know how much of our audience, not just in KnockBack, but LSM in general, I don't know how many of those guys and gals we have, but I would rely on them for a little bit of education, in that, like, I would, I might be able to educate you in manga or anime or Star Wars or something like that. Colin could educate you on any number of sports topics. You guys got to educate us on this kind of stuff.
Indeed. Yeah. And it's funny because I try not to read too much and garner too. It was actually, we were talking about it on The Last of Us HBO reviews that we're doing, where I don't really care what the HBO show says, like what people are saying about it. It's like, I want to kind of absorb it and think about it as a piece of fiction on my own, as if I don't have the very modern advantage of knowing what every creator thinks about every single thing that they've ever done. And so, yeah, it's cool to know that stuff, but at the same time, I like just interpreting it, as
I think
your
it's
everyday
important.
man.
It's important, dude, to have your own perspective in this pop culture, nerd culture. Everyone's got a YouTube channel world,
Which is totally fine, but it's such a modern thing because imagine watching an episode of Battlestar Galactica in 1979 and you turn it off, or Twilight Zone in 1963 or whatever, and you turn it off and it's over.
That's it.
Now you can hope that one of your friends or family members or someone saw it, coworker, and then maybe you could talk about it in that venue. You're not even sure if you're ever going to see it again. And if it's going to be on, you have to get your TV guide and I guess figure that out.
Yeah, TV guide, good call.
So it's just, we've gone such a long way to, that was the level of, there probably were people like us. I'm sure there were. It would be so interesting to know, probably doing maybe newsletters and fanzines and stuff, the things that people used to do back in the day. Yeah. And that shit's awesome.
Love it.
And that's about as nerdy as it gets.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to bob and weave and juke around. Speaking of sports, right? You kind of got to just get out of the way of these people that want to almost throw these hits on you by interpreting something or by pointing you towards the definitive explanation of X, Y, or Z, like is happening on the HBO podcast supplement, which I think is really cool, but I don't know. It's just not for me. I'm into that only when I fully absorb something and I feel like there's not much more I can get out of it. An example of that would be Star Wars. Like I've read about the making of Star Wars and the books and the films and all these different, just gotten to all of it because and the same thing with The Shining.
Yes.
Because it's
Anything
like, okay,
Kubrick.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Now I think what it's very complicated. Now I want to get into this, but I'm not generally interested in the mechanics.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, man. And you know what? Some of it's interesting. Like on the plane to Houston, I was reading an Akira Kurosawa book where I love his films. I'm obsessed with him like a lot of filmmakers are. But at a certain point, it's entertaining and it's informative for something that you're fascinated with. But when do you cross the line over into the magic being dispelled? That's where I kind of walk that tightrope or try to dance that dance where it's like, I don't want the magic spoiled. You know what I mean? Like I still want to come out with some questions because that's the chemistry. Like that's the energy that I want. Like you want to be left wanting. So yeah, I get caught in between that sometimes. And sometimes it could spoil it. It really can. It could just kind of dispel the magic to the point where there's no fascination left. So, and it's weird. I love that old era. Like I think of the late 70s fan clubs and zines and rags and having to really work for like a small fan community and interpretation and behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff, where now we're spoiled to knowing everything. And a lot of that, like we talked about with the Last of Us podcast, is the corporations realizing like not only can we provide the content, but we could provide the podcast with the, with the Troy Bakers and with the Craig Mazins and Neil, and we could get involved in everything and we could cash in on everything. So we're in that era now where we're responsible as the consumer to, set our boundaries for ourselves. How much do we want, and just stay away from unfortunately, a lot of it, if you don't want a lot, you got to stay away from social media. You got to stay away from the internet. You got to be disciplined. If you want a lot, you don't have to work that hard for it.
Right. It's very well put. What was I was writing it down because what was the Star Wars zine called? Bantha Crossing?
Oh, right? Bantha Tracks.
Bantha Tracks.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Bantha Tracks. That's what it was.
I wish I still had some of those.
Do you remember any other, were you a fan of any other of those or did you get any of the like truly renegade, like dude photocopying things at library kind of stuff in the 80s? Like that's the stuff I'm really interested in, is like who is doing that, how, why, when, where.
That is fascinating question.
It's good shit, man.
The original Battlestar Galactica stuff, which I'm sure exists, would be awesome. No, the only other thing I got into, especially with toy lines, Joe's, G1 Transformers, was, cutting out the proofs of purchase things for special, and Kenner did this too with Star Wars, for the proofs of purchase stuff. That would be fascinating stuff to track down. The only thing I could think of, as the New York sort of underground cartoonists were getting big before they blew up, guys like Vaughn Bodie and Robert Crumb and all those guys, they did a small magazine out of New York called the Gothic Blimp Works, which was like a collection of all their work, before they got picked up by the big publishers that just became big underground cartoon sensations. And those are hard to get. And I've seen like, maybe issue 3 of Gothic Blimpworks for like torn to pieces, to shreds, for maybe $800 or something. But it's only going to get, if you could afford it and you're into it, get it now, because it's only going to be $1,800 3 years from now, type of thing. That's the only thing I could think of that I would have liked to, which I found out about, in the last 20 years. I wasn't a kid. But that is one thing that reminds me of that, like, those things that, were published and tactile and made by hand and assembled at copy machines or whatever early version of Kinko's they had at the time. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, just the grind, maybe taking out ads and Toy Fair and shit like that. I don't know, like, how you didn't find people. I love that, because I had a similar thing. People know the early PlayStation magazines. Like I made connections with people by using those classifieds that were at the back of the magazine. Like that actually worked. I definitely traded games that way and bought games and sold games. I definitely met people, including people I became pretty close with. And that was all just through putting it out there and being like, I like Final Fantasy and I have a copy of Beyond the Beyond to sell for $10. And then someone emailing you and then just kind of trusting it, hoping for the best. And I remember everyone was so skeptical about the internet back then, but I must be honest, I never had a bad experience with any of that stuff. Like I never had someone rip me off. I never had someone not be who they were, say they were, or anything like that. Like I did. Right. I miss that era. I miss that era a lot. It was just a fucking flash, man. The dial-up internet era was something special. We didn't know we didn't quite yet understand it, that it was going to be this thing. It was something you still went on. You don't go online anymore, do you? When's the last time you went online?
It's true. We've been online for like 20
years.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 decades. I know, it's crazy.
I would say maybe not that long, maybe like 15 years since like the rise of the smartphone, especially, like,
yes. Good point.
That's when I stopped going online. I'd be like, I'm going to go online for a little while.
15 years is a good call. Yeah. It's a bit. Yeah. Because you're referring to 25-ish years ago. It's not that long ago. It makes me feel old, but it's really not that long ago.
It isn't, right? I always think about time literally passing. Like that was 25 Christmases ago, like 25 Christmases. What has happened in 25 Christmases? 25 Easters, 25 4th of July. It's time, man. It's so interesting how you'll appreciate this. There's something I'm really good at. People are really impressed that I know like dates really well, and not usually specific, like March 4th, but years, like when things happened, or I have a really good feeling of when something would have happened. And people often, Micah has and others have asked me like, when was this person born? And I was like, 1785, something like that. And it was like, 1787, right? Like, so you just kind of have a good idea for time and place. And there's this new metagame that's kind of growing, because first it began as like kind of geolocating, like people being like, where am I?
Okay.
So like they put a picture of themselves. There's like a mountain in the back and there's all this, and people would like locate exactly like where the picture was even taken. Right. And just based on the clues in the picture. And that's
cool.
So like, this is this kind of tree. There's like this kind of thing. There's this car here, but there's an even meta level to it that I'm really into, where it's like, when did this picture get taken? And so it'll be a picture of like a back of a building, like a back of a cowl door or something like that. It's like, when was this? And I can fucking nail that shit.
Oh, that's so cool.
Nail it. Yeah. So I love that kind of stuff, man. But it's so funny how when you think back at the things that you can be identifying on that, it's like, it's 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but it's so distinct that it's not now. And that's what's so disturbing about seeing those 4K images. We've talked about it before, of New York City in the 80s, where it looks like you're seeing it as beautiful as you can possibly see it today.
That's outstanding.
But it's not now. And you damn well know it.
Right.
I love it.
Because the optics, right? The building materials, things look different. The cars, whatever. They don't make gutters out of that anymore. Like,
people are wearing huge headphones, Walkman, like walking with big bags, shoulders for the women. It's good shit, dude. I love that stuff.
Time travel. We're getting as close to time travel without actually time traveling now.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we will, because we've been filming things in such high resolution for so long now, we will really be able to time travel in the future. back to these times.
Fantastic.
Because these times exist in 4K and 8K. These times, you're not going to see it much better than that.
You're
so
right. Great
you're
point.
You won't be able to discern it.
Right.
It's just
it's
not going to
feel like you are there. It's going to feel tangible and tactile and like, oh yeah, that feels like 2023. 10
It
years
all goes
on.
back to that picture of that guy in that bathrobe from the 50s. That we showed you that picture, right?
Oh yes, yeah.
That Mike and I are obsessed with, where it's like
Yes.
this guy is literally looks like he's from now.
That is fantastic.
Every part of him. It like he doesn't belong there at all. Very creepy shit.
That is
All right.
creepy as fuck.
Dick, let's talk a little bit more about Whiplash. I'm curious, like your deeper thoughts on this character, the ethos and the lore, the performance, however you want to take it. I mean, talk to me a little bit about this.
Love seeing Mickey Rourke. Love this guy. Love this character. First of all, I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but what a face, right? It's like Mickey Rourke. It doesn't even matter what he's got on. It's like I could probably tell that's Mickey Rourke under the armor. There's just a Mickey Rourke-ness to the physicality. It's not just the acting chops, which are amazing, by the way. But yeah, it was cool to see him pop up. And again, I wish I gave him a little more to chew on. You know, they're just like, Mickey, be a bad guy. Not only that, but you can't talk your native language. I thought he did a serviceable Russian accent. They didn't give him much.
He doesn't
dialogue.
say much, right?
Wasn't a man of many words,
right?
Which was smart. Because I'm
like
not
grunting.
sure about, not sure about Mickey. Mickey Rourke could probably do any accent. Getting him to do it though, I'm not sure. You know, Jon Favreau's kind of meek. I don't know if he's the guy to bring something out of Mickey Rourke that Mickey Rourke doesn't want to do. But you know, I just love him. He has such a screen presence. And again, like thinking back to Marv and Sin City, I don't think I saw the second Sin City, but just power. Like he brings such a power. So I would love, you know, if they kept that source material in about maybe I'm a little justified for wanting to kick the shit out of Iron Man. If they just left that in, just gave it that little extra, I think it would have been much more successful. And I think people, especially Marvel fans, traditional Marvel fans, would be beefing with it a little less too. It's interesting. I could see them having a big problem with like not wanting to give Mickey Rourke something a little deeper. Like I feel like they could have got any number of mediocre character actors to play this part. So the fact they went out and got Mickey Rourke was maybe overkill, but I was certainly happy to see him. And, you know, the only thing, it's funny because this is a very provocative era for, like we said, for computer special effects. It was still coming into its own. It was good, man. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we even think about earlier iterations of Weta and like top end special effects with the Lord of the Rings movies and stuff, and even the Hobbit movies, right? But I think a lot of it's serviceable. We talk about the Grand Prix race, the Formula One race in Monaco and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that bothered me was the actual on live action compositing, like the lightning effects on Whiplash's, you know, cattails on his whips, right, or the fire that's composited. The compositing in this movie looked particularly canned. Mm-hmm. And that it's weird. Like I could almost forgive like half-assed or dated compositing if it's like a middling performance, but like when you get a Mickey Rourke and you put it on top of his stuff, it just seems like an insult. You know what I mean? It stands out that much more. It's like, it's fucking Mickey Rourke. Like, you know, and I think that's just, you're just beholden to the technology at the time. You know, it's frame by frame. It's, you know, high end film, 60 frames a second, whatever it is. Like, it's hard to do that kind of compositing. It's fucking tough, man. I don't envy those people at all, but that's the one thing that stood out for me. You know, but I think, you know, other than
you have to go frame by frame when you composite, right? I mean, yeah. I assume that's automated and maybe more now, but
it can be keyed. But
right.
I would think high end, you're going in and filling in between the, you know, you're doing the in-betweening anyway because you want it to be seamless.
Right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, but Mickey Rourke, I mean, in this, that was, you know, A to Z. It was so cool to see all these star-studded people pop up, whether they were larger parts or cameos. That's neat. Not that, you know, you have to, like you were saying before, not that you have to go in for like, you know, cramming as much as you can, that flop sweat of like, you know, just trust your actors, trust your core material. You don't need to stick in a million cameos just because you're trying to make the movie better. But it was cool to see like a star-studded cast. I think it was Because think about it, right? 12, 13 years ago, this was the beginning of, I would argue, maybe it started a little earlier with Peter Jackson and the Tolkien stuff, but I would argue like this is where nerd culture started to come into its own. Like it's not just mid-budget, made for a certain demographic movies. Like this is nerd culture was crossing over to blockbuster status. And I guess, the Transformer movies and Michael Bay and everything had a lot to do with that too. But for as much as a lot of my generation doesn't like those things, but that's a thing too, where you could get Sam Rockwell to sign on in 2 days. Like a big movie star at that time, like Sam Rockwell or Scarlett Johansson or Mickey Rourke, like they were going in for this stuff. It wasn't schlock, anymore. This was stuff to be taken seriously. This was kind of the dawning of that, especially for the comic book stuff specifically.
What do you make of, because I had to look this up. I had this theory. It's not well formed because I don't know very much about comic books and Iron Man, but Iron Man doesn't seem to have very many villains to draw from. I went and looked up a list of like even ones that I've even heard of. I've heard of Mandarin, and apparently that's his big villain. I don't know if you see him in the third one or something. Oh, that's
considered a big one. Okay.
And
that's
then
interesting.
Obadiah Stane is, I guess, another one that's pretty big.
Okay.
And then there, Madam Mask, Spy Master.
Okay.
So not Ultimo. There's some, these seem to be so like budget, some of these. Titanium Man, Crimson Dynamo, Blizzard. It's kind of cool.
Blizzard, okay.
Firebrand, and then Living Laser.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of these.
And the one that looks coolest to me is Firepower, who's just this dude in this massive like mech suit, basically.
Oh, I know that character. I know what he looks like anyway. I don't know too much about the Iron Man stable of villains. I grew up in the 70s where all the Marvel characters, it was like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Hulk, sometimes like the Triumvirate, sometimes the Avengers. So I always think about those larger Marvel villains where it's like everybody's going to face this big bad.
Right.
But that's a great question. Like I'm not even familiar with this Iron Man specific, the Iron Man universe specific villains. That is an interesting thing. And it's interesting because Iron Man, I had a very brief flirtation with both Spider-Man and Iron Man comics in probably the early 80s, like 82, 83, where I would go into the drugstore, give the spinner rack a twirl and like just take one. I think in trying to get into it, it never really latched on with me. But I don't even remember who was in those books. I always think of the Spider-Man villains. They're so iconic.
The Sinister Six and all those dudes.
Rhino and Reptile and Kraven,
my dude Shocker.
Hunter, and yes. And Juggernaut. I always think of those, and I think I wrongly paint those Spider-Man specific villains as Iron Man villains, but I don't think that's right. So you make a good point. I have a big space in my comic thing where I just don't know.
Yeah, I love the whole obscure villain, obscure hero shit. That's why it's not very obscure, but even in DC, like guy like Captain Boomerang, who's going to be in the Avenger League or the Kill the Justice League game in a few months. I'm like, that character's dope. I like that character a lot. And yeah. I love the Batman, just all of the Batman rogue gallery. It's just so cool. Calendar Man and all these random ass
He
dudes.
has a great one too. Fuck? It's true.
So it's weird that I'm sure I think that in looking at that list, which was from just a random website, it just seemed like very samey, like dudes in suits, people in suits, some random, I don't know what the theme is there, but I'd be interested to know. Like, I don't know who the bad guy is in Iron Man 3. Please don't spoil it for me. Cause I was just thinking to myself, I was like, should I look? But I didn't know either about this one.
Obadiah was the Jeff Bridges character, right? Is that right?
I guess so. That's right. Obadiah. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
It's interesting too to think like the comic book era with Iron Man, all of that stuff, and not just Iron Man, all of the old Marvel and DC comics, like that was all fan generated feedback. Like, why do you think you saw Juggernaut pop up so much in Amazing Spider-Man? Because the fucking fans loved him and they knew. So if a character wasn't successful, you had Lex Luthor, for Superman, you had Reptile and Rhino and Juggernaut and Kraven the Hunter and all these characters for Spider-Man because the fans loved them. And then they had to say, okay, the fans love these 10 characters. How can we generate them so they're popping up in a cycle enough to appease the fans, and then we got to work this character in. So it is kind of fascinating to see what came through the filter of all that. And then when the new artists popped up in the 90s and the 80s and 90s with McFarlane and what they did, and the villains that would last the test of time, and then some of them that fell by the wayside because they just weren't as successful as others. It's kind of a fascinating beat for comics that I'm really not familiar with. But isn't it funny that, like, I feel like Spider-Man, right? Peter Parker, we love him, right? He's lovable. Why did he need such an amazing, iconic rogues gallery of villains? Same with Batman, when there's such great characters. Iron Man, same, but he does it without, at least I'm completely ignorant to it, but he does it without that, which is interesting. So it's like Iron Man's even kind of on a upper tier, an even higher tier, a higher platform, because he kind of operates without the universe. It's just a character, kind of, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do dig that they put his house in Malibu, right on the Malibu cliffs, which is funny. That's right near where I used to live in Santa Monica. So I did dig that. But again, I just wanted to underline what you were saying earlier about compositing and just some of the visuals. I feel like I'm crazy for saying this, but like, what stops them from putting Robert Downey Jr. into a suit? I guess I just don't understand. I know that he's not going to fly off. I'm not, I understand that he's not going to be able to do very much in his hands, or maybe with his hands, or maybe he won't even be able to move very much. But wouldn't it be cheaper and more realistic to make this really $200 million fucking movie?
Yeah.
Make a suit and put him in it. Am I crazy? Would they have not been able to make that work? Is it just not possible to make Iron Man look real in a real suit? Because I see people have fucking dope ass looking statues and these big figures and these metal things. It's like, why couldn't you scale that into your Marvel? So,
yeah.
And Disney, I think that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, is just knowing that they're just sitting in this kind of capsule, and then they're doing all this stuff over them.
Yeah.
Afterwards, it's weird to me, and I know it might be for audio as well, but that can be circumvented easily enough too. I mean, I
would think so.
Look at David Prowse in Star Wars. It doesn't sound. I mean, they were doing that very easily. It's not a huge deal.
Decades earlier, they could fabricate the stuff, and they could automate the stuff that they fabricate, especially for the closer shots, medium or close-up shots of the helmet opening and closing, because you were at that era where that face compositing in the suit still looks a little dicey. It's getting better, but it still looks like it's composited. So have not only fabricate something beautiful, which they're quite capable of in 2009, 2010, but to automate those things simply, I think, I don't think would have been pricey, but CG is also pricey. So I hear you. They were definitely capable of that. And keeping it practical and convincingly practical where you can, I think, is still a good idea in 2023, because, real is real. You don't have to make it look real if it is actually real.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't expect that they're going to use real stuff for the fight scenes and all that. I just mean, like, there's a lot of stuff where they're just standing there. And even if it's just a few seconds and a close-up shot or whatever, I just feel like you would want to ground that as much as you possibly could. Yeah. So I was surprised to see that. And because, again, we're just not at the place yet where it really works very well. I wanted to ask about a couple of specific characters. I specifically want to talk about, to begin, Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. I like this character a lot. Find her very endearing. And again, no familiarity with the comic books at all. But I think this performance is really quite awesome. And I think it's a great sign. It's, as you were saying, even with the inclusion of Scarlett Johansson and others, as this goes on, and Samuel L. Jackson, obviously, and the expansion of the Marvel Cinematic Universe into what it would become, they really do get the buy-in of legitimate people. And I think that adds a lot of gravitas to it. I think, in other words, I think you could have the Star Wars, like, we have no idea who any of these people are kind of situation with the actors, which would work. But I think the fact that, in other words, I think that getting them on board was actually a key factor to getting it taken seriously. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have a legitimately good movie with legitimate actors in it, and then they add legitimacy to it, that just feeds that cycle. And obviously it fed itself very well. I mean, look at all the people they've gotten to sign on over the years since then. So, but I wanted to stick specifically with this kind of, this not meek at all character, Pepper Potts, and she's the CEO of Stark Industries, and I don't know, I like her, and I like her like kind of her little thing with Iron Man, and I don't know, it's fun. I just wanted to talk about her a little bit. Do you have anything to say?
I mean, I think about this era with Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, she was at the height of her powers. I mean, she was one of the biggest movie stars, period. And I get it with Gwyneth Paltrow. She's got, first of all, she really does have the charisma to hang with Robert Downey Jr., which I think is important because Robert Downey Jr. will charm everybody else right off the screen. And she's kind of the feminine or, female answer to him. And that chemistry, by the way, is amazing. Like, it's a very believable friendship. And I just like the dynamic. I like having like a mother hen type character. Not only is she beautiful and attractive, but she's got that quality to keep this guy in check. She's Tony's rock. I mean, she's family. She really genuinely, she's the one person who really cares for him and watches over him, because as smart as he is, right, and as selfless as he is, he's got that hedonistic sort of irresponsible side, so she could rein him in. But that's what I love about her most. I don't even know. I'm sure there are other answers for this character in casting, but I don't know if anybody of this era could have done it like Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, she could really be toe to toe with the big RDJ. And she really, and for the whole franchise, I mean, she really makes it work. She's just as charismatic. And I love that about her, especially, this, she's visually captivating. She's a beautiful woman, but she's also got those very likable qualities that he has too. And so I think of them almost as counterparts, which is, they're kind of one and the same. They're cut from the same cloth, these two.
Yeah, I also find it interesting that she's not done very much since around the time she joined Iron Man.
No,
she's done very, very little. I don't know if she retired, or I know she like kind of became a mom, and I know she was with the dude from Coldplay for a while.
Yeah, she was married to Chris Martin for years, right?
Yeah,
they're not anymore, as far as I know.
And I know she's an entrepreneur. Like she owns like a whole series of brands and all that kind of stuff. But
I didn't know that.
I just found that interesting that she really doesn't do very much. The role that I think since Iron Man, Pepper Potts is by far her most notable role, and it's the one she revisits. And if you remove those roles from her filmography, she's done like a half dozen things.
Yeah, not much. Shakespeare in Love was a big one for her, and then a lot of rom-coms. Right? Like a lot of romantic comedy. She's kind of got those comedic chops.
That's what I'm saying, before Iron Man.
No, before, yeah. Since like in the last 12 years, she really she kind of disappeared. Maybe she flipped to the other side of the camera, but that's a good, and you said she's kind of an entrepreneur business-wise. That's interesting. She also comes from a Hollywood lineage, which I wonder about that sometimes, man. Like, not only did you grow up in that space, now you're doing it for however many years. Like, maybe some people just, say like enough is enough, not just financially, but like, let me pursue something else. Like, let me have a life outside of this Hollywood bubble. So good for her. If, she, and then also to get to the point of being able to be really choosy, not just because she's got all this Disney money now, which she does, obviously, but I envy that. That's cool. Like, get far enough along where you could call your own shots and come back into this. You could come in and out of the space as you see fit. There's something really cool about that.
Well, her seminal role for me will always be in 2002's Austin Powers 3 as Dixie Normus.
Oh, I forgot she was in that.
Yeah.
I haven't got... We get so mad that Graydon loves those movies, and we haven't watched 3 yet because I just.
Oh, he does like them.
Oh, that's he so loved the first 2, dude. I didn't think I wasn't sure if he was going to be embarrassed to watch them with me, or if he just straight up wasn't going to think they were funny, or wasn't going to get it. But he didn't care that he was watching with me, and he got it, and he thought it was hilarious. So yeah, he ate it up because I wasn't sure.
Very badly burned.
Shouts out to Will Ferrell. That guy's the best.
Yeah, I miss Mike Myers is missed.
Yes.
I think his hesitance to do very much is respectable. I think that like he's a legend, no doubt. But there was a lot more juice in the Austin Powers orange.
I think so.
And I think there still is. And unfortunately, I just think it's just kind of too late. You know, it's been a while, and it's
been a long time.
And no one else can play him. It's not like it has to have him. So you can't be like, let's phase out Dr. Evil. Like Dr. Evil's, well, it would be like Scott maybe, and then Austin Powers' son or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
It could be something fun like that.
Yeah, he could do the Nigel Powers thing. It would be sad to watch Michael Caine go, but then
right.
who? But let me ask you this question, and this is sorry for this non sequitur, but who could be cast as Austin Powers' son? That would be funny. Maybe I don't know. I'm thinking like 10 years ago, Michael Cera. He's probably too old now.
What about that? Hold on a second.
I really don't know. Michael Cera.
What about a guy like John Mulaney?
That would be. I like him. I think he's fascinating because he's kind of got like a movie star appeal to the way he looks, but he's very funny. Let me put John Mulaney to you like this, and I know Jerry Seinfeld's a big fan of his, which is very odd because Jerry Seinfeld doesn't seem to be a big fan of anybody. He, as like somebody who I think Jerry Seinfeld considers a protege, like a proper protege, which is cool. I mean, it means a lot. Jerry Seinfeld's hilarious, one of the best that ever lived. Yeah. But John Mulaney doesn't look like he's going to be funny. And then he gets on stage and a minute in, you're like, this guy's fucking hilarious. But he looks like a movie star. And that's weird because most comics look funny. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So he's interesting. I'm definitely watching that dude. I think he writes a lot. So I'm not sure how much he's going to do in front of the camera, but
yeah,
he's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I've enjoyed just someone like some son that like wants nothing to do with that life, just very nonchalant, business like.
Yeah, he has an apathy.
But he gets drawn into it because of the evil family or whatever. I don't know.
That's fun.
Could be a fun thing. Yeah, he's an interesting cat because I like his really dark humor. I always say that I love his Back to the Future bit about like going back and and have you know it about how
I don't think I know this.
It's like a whole bit about how they're pitching Back to the Future and they're like, yeah, it's about this, that, and the other thing, and you go back in time and then you fuck your mom and all that kind of and like all that kind of shit. And they're like, yeah, that's great, let's get that. I think he's a really funny guy because you don't expect some of the things. Well, what's funny about him, I think the most is that he reads as gay, but he isn't, which is one thing.
Yep.
And the second thing is that he's like a deep-welled alcoholic.
Oh, and so I didn't know this.
And like total recovering.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Alcoholic, as I understand it.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, and so he draws from this, this kind of tortured existence.
Yeah,
and I think that it just doesn't read that way, but it is
not
that
at
way.
all. He is very sharp. Like he's very well dressed. He's very put together. Yeah, he's not the typical stand-up comic, and I don't mean to stereotype, but there's all sorts. I think of what's his name, Christian Maniscalco and stuff like that. There are comics that. I hate to say it, but there are good-looking comics. It's terrible where this is going.
Yeah, but Anthony Jeselnik's another really good-looking guy.
That's
what makes him. That's what makes him so fucking horrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of these guys that stand up, they're goofy, they do some voice acting, but these people could, work perfectly fine, in front of the camera, and they do, So yeah, that's interesting, man. That was an interesting little offshoot of a conversation, but I like this.
Yeah, that's fine. It is what it is.
I love it.
I'm saying, my friend. All right, let's. I want to talk about War Machine. And we, enter Don Cheadle. What do you think about this role? And kind of, I did read a little bit about the kind of mystery surrounding the monies offered and kind of the cut rate, and I think the original actors' falling fortunes, along with Robert Downey Jr.'s rising fortunes, and obviously War Machine doesn't play a major role here in the movie, but he's in it, and I like this. I like this gray character that's kind of, he's a military man. He's a little bit of a yes man. He believes in the order of operations and all of that, but he is also understanding what's really happening and has an eye towards it and likes Iron Man, and they have some sort of camaraderie anyway. I dig it. I dig the character a lot. And is it a little lame that he's just wearing another Iron Man suit? Yeah, but it's like, this is kind of the world where that's the way it goes, because it's about super weapons, like real super weapons. So what do you think about this performance and this character, and how do you enjoy it or lack thereof in this particular film?
You know what? That's funny, man. You could tell I come from a video game background and not a comic book background, because I think how I was introduced to War Machine was through Marvel vs. Capcom. I never knew what that was. I never knew what War Machine was. So that was cool to see. By the time this movie came out, obviously I was very familiar with that video game.
Awesome
franchise.
Name, by the way. Awesome name.
One of the best names ever.
Yep.
Just straight up, because it could be a villain. War Machine. I mean, it sounds kind of like a villain name, right?
Totally. Imagine naming a pet War Machine.
Dude, that is
like
an awesome name. War Machine would be a great name for a hamster.
Yeah. Totally. That would be hysterical. I'd love that.
Why did I never think of that? That is hilarious. My kids will never have another hamster, so you guys use it. They're over the hamster thing. That era has since passed. Has passed. Don Cheadle is an interesting one for me, because I like him, and I think about him in the Ocean's movies. Right, he's part of the Brad Pitt, George Clooney entourage. He's part of the group. He's part of the 11 or 12 or 13, whatever we're talking about in that particular film. But he's really interesting because honestly, we talk about charisma and charm, which is going to be a huge part of the conversation with Robert Downey, right? And Gwyneth Paltrow and other, the Mickey Rourkes of the world. But he's got just enough charisma to share the stage. Like, he's not going to get booted off the stage with RDJ, but he's not going to drown. He's not a threat. I feel like too much personality or too much charisma, this is not what you want in this character. So he's well cast. And that's not... Don Cheadle's great. I think not only do I think he's a good actor, I think he's very funny. But he's definitely one of those dudes where I could see, like, this is an appropriate casting for this character. And it's nice to have this character a little bit of a foil for Iron Man, because they have differing philosophies a little bit. Iron Man wants to be independent at this point. He doesn't want to go in for the military industrial complex or be kind of owned by the American military. And Don Cheadle is American military. He is an Air Force officer, but also somebody to fight back to back with Iron Man in this world, pre-Avengers, pre-Hulk and Black Widow and Hawkeye and Spidey and all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to have somebody in the Iron Man universe specifically for him to fight back to back with, an ally. And I think that's all what War Machine is. And I think they do a good job of giving us just enough of this character too. And for Iron Man to have a friend outside of Pepper Potts, and also, like, what I love about this movie, and I think this is the buffer that Robert Downey Jr. presents, is that he's got this lighthearted tone to him. And I think especially in the character of Tony, where the drama and the melodrama never lingers too long. So the movie keeps an upbeat and fun tone and never gets mired down in, just melodrama, and I love that. I love that jaunty, upbeat presentation. It almost reminds me of what we'll get with Guardians of the Galaxy later. Like, I like a playful tone. I like an upbeat tone. It's a comic book. And later on with the Avengers movie and Civil War and things, when things get more contentious, that's fun too. But I like the upbeat, fun presentation of this. And I think the friendship between War Machine and Iron Man is done just so. So it's a nice alliance, but we don't have to cross over into smarm, or like melodrama. So it's fun. I think that I know they have a lot of contentions about the final cut, but I think that dynamic works perfectly the way it is in this film, in this cut.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, that I think you'll have more insight into, is just kind of introduction of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury. I guess not introduction, but this kind of spreading of the story and the bringing in of more characters that are going to be inherently included in multiple films moving forward that are unrelated to Iron Man per se. I like this, but this gets into the whole, I don't know. It's cool thinking about it at the time, and it's kind of cringy to me thinking about what it's become, because it's just gotten so out of control, and I don't really understand the appeal of it. I find this more smallish kind of Iron Man story, or these small Hulk stories or whatever, unconnected or untethered, presumably in the same world, but we don't need to really hit that over the head. That they started getting organized at this point is cool, but it starts to put me off a little bit too. And I can't help but read forward. And even looking at the rest of phase 1, I get less and less excited when I look at the list of things that are coming. I was like, Thor? Oh man. I don't know. Like this. Could I do it? I guess I was skeptical about the Hulk. Yeah. But anyway, I feel like the whole Shield thing really gets into this, and it's really the beginning of the true organization of the MCU. And so I'm wondering what you make of it, and what you make of its inclusion, and again, getting some big actors involved, including Samuel L. Jackson, but of course others. So talk to me a little bit about this.
Good old Sam Jackson. Royale with cheese. I can't, we always pick on poor Sam Jackson. He's awesome. He's just so much larger than life. We talk about this with Mace Windu. It's like, it's very hard not to see Sam Jackson through the character. I think about the same thing with Nick Fury. It's like, I see Jules from Pulp Fiction, and I think I blame this on Quentin Tarantino. I think, listen, Sam Jackson had arrived pre-1993, 4, whenever Pulp Fiction came out, right? But that character was such an amazing character, and an amazing portrayal of a character by Sam Jackson, that character of Jules, that hitman, one of the protagonists of the film, that Sam Jackson kind of started and stopped with that role. And I just don't know what it is. It's me. And a lot of it's probably just me. He doesn't do a bad job. I also think two things. I don't know if I understand the Nick Fury character because I'm not familiar with Avengers comic books. And so to me, he's a very strange character. Like, who is this curator, choreographer? He seems like he's less powerful than everybody that works for him, with the exception of like the faceless henchmen at the low level. Like, I'm talking about the Black Widows, the event Captain America is like, who is this guy? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand the character. And also that might be my fault too, because there are pieces missing for me still. I think in the Avengers timeline, there's 1 or 2 movies I haven't seen, and I haven't seen the second Spider-Man film. So there are missing pieces in the puzzle for me, but I just think it's a weird character. And it does seem like in this era anyway, I think it gets a little more cohesive later in the MCU timeline. But right now it seems like they're trying to shoehorn stuff together, because obviously it needs to arrive at a certain place. So he almost seems like an afterthought in this film. And then of course we get into Thor, and we get into the post credits of this movie and everything, and the other characters that are going to come later. But it seems like, it almost seems like they're forcibly painting or setting the stage for the next things to come. And for people that are ignorant of the comic book world like myself, it's a little confusing. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like an offshoot, like an unnecessary offshoot. Eventually it'll come together, but this movie shouldn't be successful based on what comes later. It should be successful as a standalone film. And I think that's where we get into trouble with the Marvel stuff, with the Star Wars stuff, the stuff that's very operatic and, has a huge longevity, as far as, think of like the epically long, miles long cargo train, freight train. That's just like, it should work now. It should work by 2010 standards. So he's a little bit of a confusing character for me. And I think the casting is a little bit tricky for me too, but I guess it is what it is. I don't know that much about S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm still learning, and maybe I'll be edified as we go on and kind of watch them in order, because my MCU is further along than you, but I'm also all over the place, jumping around, watching stuff that my son hasn't seen or my wife hasn't seen. Oh, we got to fill in this gap. So it's tricky. I don't want to be too judgmental yet, but in this movie, I'm not sure how well it works, the whole Nick Fury character.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to, again, be true to not get too much information from outside sources. So yeah, again, I'm kind of going with what the movie's showing you and telling you. And yeah, it's a little confusing to me too, to be honest. But I'm looking at now that I guess they call this the Infinity Saga, which are all the movies through 2019, I guess.
Through 2019, okay.
And it's like, man, there's a lot of them.
There's a lot.
There really are.
Disney has it. The reason I'm interested in you with Disney Plus is because I just noticed last night that they have different ways you could watch them. You could watch them in timeline order, and then they have Disney MCU phases. Phase 1s through 4. This film and the original Iron Man are in phase 1. So you could kind of choose how you digest them, which is interesting. I'll say this about Nick Fury, the dynamic between Nick Fury / S.H.I.E.L.D. and Iron Man in this film. I like that they're still a little contentious with each other. Like, not only does Iron Man still doesn't want to join up, S.H.I.E.L.D. still doesn't really want to be affiliated with Iron Man. They're like, you could kind of work for us in a consulting capacity because he might be too much of a wild card for them, you know? So I like that dynamic where it's still like, Iron Man, Tony says at a certain point in this film, like, I'm not a joiner. So I like the fact that he's still holding on to that roguish, you know, lone gunman thing. And S.H.I.E.L.D.'s not even sure they want him on board yet. So that's kind of a neat thing where there's still that, especially for the comic book peeps, you know, it's still that thing where, you know, there's some question marks surrounding this joining of forces. I guess that's fun.
The final thing I want to ask you, I don't know if there's anything else you want to discuss, but the final thing I'm curious about, because I do feel like this is an interstitial film where we're kind of waiting for things to happen and to get places. So I'm not sure I have much more to say about it, to be honest. But I did want to ask, since we've seen 3 of the films now, and I have the list here. So yeah, it's Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, and then Iron Man 2. What order of quality would you put these in? I guess we should continuously update these as we go, since we're going to watch them in order over the years to come.
Sure.
So I would personally order them in the order of release so far. I think Iron Man is the strongest, and then I would say the Hulk, and then Iron Man 2. So that's easy enough. But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I remember being very surprised by the Hulk, like you having really enjoyed it. That was the Ed Norton Hulk. And we both came away with the same thing. I think having heard that din, you know, that nerd culture din of like, this isn't very good and it's dated and it doesn't compare to modern MCU, which is an unfair comparison. But we do it. We just by natural, you know, inclination, we tend to do that in fandom anyway. It's nobody's fault, really. Hulk was fun. Iron Man 1 was awesome. It was a great origin story. Again, I'm not that familiar with how true they stayed to the comic, but it was a really cool origin story for a great character. So I think that for me, from just a filmic point of view, I think it really worked. But I have to say, I don't know. I think I might like this one the best in terms of fun and just it feeling like it never really got bogged down. It moved at a really brisk, nice pace. For a movie that was 2 hours long, it didn't feel like that to me. I really enjoyed this one. I don't know what it is. I think I fear I would be much more judgmental of it had I been more familiar with whatever point along we are in the original source material in the comics to judge something against, but I don't have that perspective. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And it may be also maybe surprising knowing like this isn't a very loved film, or at least at best, maybe it's seen as a mediocre effort.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know. So it's really not like in the for people that have seen all of these so far, this is one of the worst ones.
Yeah, I think Iron Man 1, from what I could see, is really generally pretty loved. And I think maybe because people like that movie so much, it was a hard act to follow. It's kind of an origin story, like a first part has an unfair advantage though, just in so far as it's setting the tone, right? So whatever comes first is kind of setting the pace for the rest of the, you know, the rest of the race, the rest of the journey. But I enjoyed this one more than I thought I was going to. And, you know, I think a large part of that is the casting. Sam Rockwell was awesome in this. Talk about charismatic, funny, just having like a very Tony Stark-like character, but kind of the flip side of the coin from Tony, right? Like very similar, but he's completely out for himself. He's already epically wealthy, but he's after money. You know, he wants this 25-year military contract where Tony's doing it for the betterment of the earth. You know, for as much as he has his little character quirks, like Tony's a good guy. And Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer is completely out for himself. But Sam Rockwell's so good in it. He's really great. He was good.
I like the dinner scene, actually. with quite a bit in the hangar. I think that's a
it's
pretty
so
good scene.
fun. He's a really fun character. And it's nice to have a villain who's not like a big bad. Like he's not a physical threat. You know, he's more of a psychological. It's his ambition is the threat. You know, his ambition and his affiliations and his desires, that's the threat. It's kind of nice to have a more cerebral villain, I think. And then we have the more physical villain in Mickey Rourke, which I think is partially wasted, but it's nice to see him there. And, you know, I think the other thing, I have to give a shout out to Jon Favreau for directing a film and being so good in front of the camera too. That fight scene where they infiltrate the headquarters and Black Widow's beating the shit out of dozens of guards, and Jon Favreau is spending the entire time trying to best this one guard. I think that's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of writing and storyboarding and everything like that that I love. I love just like ideas like that you could build things around that are really entertaining. You see a mediocre movie and they don't have that kind of stuff in there. They don't have the Justin Theroux, Jon Favreau, you know, Robert Downey Jr. stamp that of, you know, it's just quality. It's quality for me. And again, I think I give it high marks because I don't have the comic book background, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would probably give Iron Man, Hulk was probably my least favorite. I would say probably Iron Man 2, then 1, although that's a very close race for me. Now I'd put Hulk last, but I might be just remembering Hulk the least because we watched it first. So
yeah, it's to me, I think I went into the Incredible Hulk being like, I just want to get through this one. I remember that being
definitely.
It was so daunting to go through the MCU because the more interesting ones to me are later. Thor, that's going to be rough for me. I think I just don't know about that character. Captain America's cool. We get back to Iron Man, and then I'm actually really interested in things like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and stuff like that, which we get to even later than that. And Doctor Strange. And that's when we get into stuff that I feel like would be more palatable to me, maybe. But what was funny was that the Hulk film from 2008 was the one that I liked it way more than I thought I was going to. And then Iron Man 2, I went into it really totally ignorant of its standing. I had no idea that people didn't like it. So I assumed that it was going to be great. And then I thought it was a little disappointing based on just what I thought, you know, what I thought it was going to be.
I really do wonder, because you're specifically really not attached to Marvel comic books specifically, but I predict, Kyle, I think the casting of these things is going to keep you in it. I think you're going to end up coming away liking these films because I think of Captain America, I think of Thor, you mentioned Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, all the Guardians of the Galaxy. The casting from soup to nuts is amazing. Like in these films, I think that's what's going to keep you in it. I think that's what's going to keep you going. That's going to give you a head of steam to get through these. I predict you coming away liking these films because of that. I think that's the one thing they did an amazing job with. You know, you come away now, it's been a while, so we're used to it now, but you come away thinking every part, every role, good guys and bad guys. I think I can't even see it cast another way at this point. You know, it's like, yeah, that specific actor or actress is tailor-made for that role. And I even kind of get them mixed up with the comic book iterations now. It's like, I can't see an Iron Man comic without thinking of Robert Downey. It's gotten to that point now. You know, I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I'm sure they're thrilled because, I mean, it revitalized the interest in comics and in the larger brand, I think. For me, I think you're right. I think the casting, just knowing what I know about the casting, I think it's quite interesting. It's just these characters, some of them are not very interesting to me. I am trying to have an open mind because the Hulk was the least interesting character to me. I mean, by far. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I would usually keep that to myself because I knew a couple people that really, really loved the Hulk. And so I tried to show my respect by not being like, I don't understand what this is, but actually it was very good. It's just so daunting looking at, there's so many movies. It's crazy that people want all of this. It's very intimidating. So maybe I'll come out the other end. I'm trying to be as open-minded as I possibly can, but damn, that's what I was saying. I don't think we're going to be watching them even enough to keep up with the ones being released. In other words, we're never going to shorten the distance.
Yeah. It's going to be like 2 steps forward.
And that's for the whole year of no releases. You know,
Yeah,
it was basically 2 years actually of no releases, from July of 2019 to July of 2021. And the one thing I do want to say in parting is, are they ever going to be able to unify everything to get X-Men in here and Fantastic Four and other things? Now, I'm not trying to be a nerd, but I actually am a huge mark for the Human Torch. So that would be I love that character. I think the character rules. And so I would love to see more of that. And I know that there's all these, Marvel breakup kind of ownership stakes that production companies refuse to give up. But you would think that, and I know that they've come around, Sony has come around with Spider-Man. Yeah. But you would think that the other entities would come around to realize that they would all work best together. And
definitely.
That is my hope, because I actually think the X-Men are the most interesting ones.
They really are.
By far, in my opinion. And then Spider-Man.
I agree.
Which they're working in. So.
And you want to see all these things together eventually. You want to see Spider-Man crossover with Wolverine, like all the things we've been waiting for. Yeah, X-Men, I think some of the movies are fine, but they haven't been done justice yet. So it would be nice for me, and again, I'm not a huge X-Men fan, but I could say enough that, I want that 90s flavored X-Men, man. Give me Jim Lee X-Men. Like, that's what I want. Like, we haven't gotten that. So yeah, it would be nice for the various powers that be to kind of relinquish there. I know Disney is, or Sony has been generous to Disney with letting them use Spider-Man, but they're still holding on to ownership of Spidey. They're not going to foolishly just let that go. So how long will it be till Disney finally could do what they want creatively with this stuff? It's kind of a mess. It's still, we talk about this every time, but it is kind of a mess. And I wish it could just, so all parties could be served and come away feeling like, they weren't robbed. How can we do that so we could just kind of make something cool? Because it really, at the end of the day, it really should be for the fans. These companies have the money. Whatever they do with this stuff, they're going to be profitable. So, yeah, man, like, give us the watered down iterations of X-Men bother me. It's like, give us seriously, come on, like, give us, especially like if Disney could do like an animated X-Men thing, and do it justice,
and get Apocalypse in there and all that. And
dude, be so good. Be so good.
Yeah, that's the stuff I love. And I'm actually looking here. Phase 6 is going to have a Fantastic Four film, apparently.
Okay, so they're going for, because they just, who signed on for that? Was it James Gunn? I'm not sure. They got somebody.
They have, let's see, it's being directed by Matt Shackman.
Okay.
And written by a pair called Jeff Kaplan and Ian Springer. I don't know.
Well, the people listening will know. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the guy who's directing Godzilla and the Titans, or directed 2 episodes of that, I guess. WandaVision, directed 9 episodes of that.
Oh, I didn't see that, but that did very well.
Couple of Game of Thrones episodes. He's a TV guy, it looks like.
Okay.
Oh, he did a bunch of The Good Wife. That's a great show. Fargo. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he's Sunny. 43 episodes.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're talking about like some
You're very welcome with
chops.
us. You're very welcome with us.
That's interesting, man. Yeah, Fantastic Four, they've tried and failed a few times. Not that I've seen any of them to judge, but
I haven't either.
I've heard. That's what I've heard.
It's going to be hard. What's funny is that 2 of the characters are really questionable, and then 2 of the characters are really cool, I think. And you kind of have that, I don't think you're going to make Mr. Fantastic cool.
That's going to be tough. That's all in the casting, though. He's a character all in the casting.
Well, the guy is cool, but yeah, just the whole like stretching and all that weird, whatever the hell.
It's going to be weird.
It's going to be very weird.
That could be weird. Yeah. Yeah. And the Thing is tough, I guess. The Thing, I don't know. You think they could do the Thing by now, though? Very important character to get right.
Yeah, totally. That's obviously got to be. That's obviously got to be totally CG.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Casting's important too, though. At least for the voice. Yeah, so that's going to be
Wasn't the most recent one, didn't they make the Human Torch black in the most recent one, which I loved. I loved that choice. I think that was right. Human Torch black.
I wonder.
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan.
Oh, it was?
That was, he was in the most recent one from like 10 years ago or so.
Oh, he can do no wrong for me.
Yeah, I dug that casting.
He's great. Creed 3, by the way. My goodness. It's out.
I haven't seen any of those.
Oh, you got to watch Creed 1 and 2. You have to watch them. You're going to love them because I know you'll love them. They're just good. They're just legitimately good movies.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I had many things to add to the list, but in the meantime, that's Iron Man 2, available obviously on Disney Plus. I rented it on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it physically if you want as well. So go check it out. Thank you for listening. Dagan, dad joke.
I got a good one.
This episode, please.
I got a good one from our friend. What did he DM me on Twitter? Serge. He came with this one. I've been wanting to use this one for a while. Had this one. I've been sitting on this one for a few weeks. Kyle, what do you call it when a lizard is having trouble with his love life?
I don't know.
A reptile dysfunction. Not bad.
Pretty good. Pretty good. I like that one. Not bad at all, my friend. Not bad at all, my friend. All right, Dig. I wish you very well. See you soon.
It was fun, my friend.
It was fun. We'll carry on with the MCU later this year for sure. I think we're going to get back to some games and some other things in the interim. And looking forward to that. So thank you so much for your kindness, your support, your love, all things Last Stand Media, KnockBack, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke, Constellation, all the rest. We couldn't do it without you. Early ad-free support over on Patreon if you're interested, and on free feeds, leave us nice reviews, etc. Merch, laststandmedia.store. You know the drill. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show is conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.